Okay. Hi, I'm Brandy. This is Hound Dog Hollow, and today I have the wonderful pleasure of interviewing J. Allen Cross, the author, the best-selling author of American Brujeria. Hi, Jay.
Hi, nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. Thank you so much for making time. I can tell that you've been super busy. I've seen you everywhere on all these podcasts and interviews. It must be so exciting.
It is exciting. It's also a little overwhelming at times, but it's been really good. It's been quite the experience, and I'm very happy that it's happening.
I'm glad to. You totally deserve it. I'm so happy for you. Um, so just can you please introduce yourself and what you uniquely bring to the community?
Absolutely. So I am a practicing witch. I've been doing this for pretty much all my life. I come from a very magically inclined family. So this is something that I was kind of raised around and kind of learned to develop as I was growing up. So now I am a full-fledged practicing folk witch, I guess you would call me. I kind of traverse the waters between witchcraft and folk magic most of the time. And I am of Mexican, Native American, and European descent. And so a lot of my mixed family culture, as well as my Catholic upbringing, really influences the way that I work my magic. And it really comes through in the types of magic I like to do and how I view the magic as well. So that's kind of a little bit of my backstory. And I do some paranormal investigation on the side, which is also fun. So.
That's really cool. What do you think lately you've been doing more of? The probably book stuff, right? As opposed to magic and paranormal investigating.
Yes, right now lately it's been a lot of book stuff. I have had kind of put the other things on the back burner a bit, but now that COVID is kind of lightening up a bit, I've been vaccinated and whatnot, the paranormal investigation is kicking back up now that we can actually get to some of these places, which is very new. For the last year, we were having to try and handle hauntings from a distance remotely, which is a very weird experience, but also a wonderful learning experience too. We got to test the boundaries of what can and can't be done with the spirit world from far away. And actually, we've had some pretty good success, which was very shocking, but very much welcome.
That's super interesting. I have a question. What kind of paranormal investigation? I feel like that's a good question because I have no idea. I imagine you just going into houses with Bibles and Virgin Mary statues, but
a little bit, sort of. So I am on a team that is really wonderfully balanced. So sometimes you'll find paranormal investigation teams that specifically only have investigators. They try and keep it very scientific and all of that, and maybe sometimes they work with a psychic. The team that I'm on, however, is made up mostly of psychics, and we also have investigators as well that do kind of the recording and do some of the evidence capturing if they can. But our main goal in what we do is to actually help people and spirits who are suffering, because that tends to be what a haunting is. Either way, whether it's the living or the dead, someone is not having a good time, and we're there to help and kind of see what we can do to make both parties happy as much as possible. So we fix on what we call resolving a haunting, because not all hauntings need to be cleansed. Some of them just simply need to be talked through a little bit. People need to move on and whatnot. So that ends up being kind of the bulk of what we do.
That's really, really cool. Is there one more question about this, just because I know we're talking about the book, but it's so interesting. Is there a busy season for paranormal investigating?
There kind of tends to be. It's weird. Our summers do tend to be a lot busier, and into the fall, and then through the winter, we don't tend to get many calls. But then once kind of spring sprungs again, then it starts all over again. So that's
interesting. That's super interesting. A little bit more. So you're Latinx, Native, male, and kind of doing folk magic, which I feel like isn't well represented in the witch social media universe. How does that, how do you feel that shows up in your medias, that you're so kind of different, which is what I love about you? But
it is, especially when as a folk magician, I have kind of the the room, the folk magic kind of gives me the room to also be Christian at the same time, which is something that we really don't find in modern witchcraft culture, because for a really, really long time, the terms witchcraft and pagan were kind of synonymous terms. Those two went together hand in hand, and they did not separate from one another. And so me being a Christian person in some of these spaces, I get a lot of very strange looks. I remember being at PantheaCon, which was a convention I went to over a year ago now. Wow, time flies. But I remember being there, and there was this event that I was at where everyone had to introduce themselves and what they kind of did and what their spiritual background is, and I'm the only one there that has to try and explain what folk Christianity is. And I very much sometimes get the feeling in certain spaces that it is not welcome, mostly due to the fact that I think a lot of people come to paganism and witchcraft and this kind of form of spirituality in order to sort of escape their traumatic Christian upbringing. So when someone then brings that back into the mix or into the environment, a lot of the times people's immediate reaction is to reject it or snuff it out or make sure that it doesn't feel welcome, because they don't feel safe around it. But unfortunately, when we do that, we also really reject a lot of practices from around the world, particularly ethnic practices. Things like a lot of Mexican folk magic is heavily Catholic. A lot of American folk magic is Christian, and that includes, things like hoodoo and conjure and all of these different types of magics that come from communities of color have heavy Christian undertones to them, or overtones to them. So when we kind of reject the Christianity from the community, we're also rejecting these communities of color as well, and kind of their magic that they have formed here in the United States. So it's something interesting that I think as a community we do need to look at. But we're slowly starting to see more acceptance when it comes to folk magic. But what I would like to see more from the community is people not leave the folk behind when they start practicing the folk magic. That's something that we're seeing a lot, where people want the spells, they want the recipes, but they don't necessarily want the people or the culture or the things that come with it. And we can't really have folk magic without the folk. So that's something that I would like to see more of in the community, and I'm hoping to sort of bring more of it forward myself as well.
And I really feel that you do. And that's one of the reasons why I follow you. I saw your Pathios article, which is it's in the description below. You guys should read it. It's excellent. And that's when I started following you. And you're a breath of fresh air, because I feel like you not only look different and practice differently, and honestly and candidly, you really put it out there. But you also really call out behaviors that are damaging. And I was at that time of my life, I was so sick of positive mindset crap. I just felt like that was it's toxic to not feel what you're feeling. You should still feel those feelings. Every feeling is valid. And I felt like you were I found you at a time where I was needing that. And you were just actually, this is wrong. And you call it the tea, because I'm not good with the slang, but you do that really well, but not in an offensive or abrasive way, just typically let's use our brains and think why are we doing that? But I feel like people get really angry about that. That and boundary setting. I feel like people get really angry at people of color for those things. So thank you so much, because it's got to take a lot of emotional labor to deal with this situation.
It definitely does. It's hard to kind of be the one that kind of goes against the current a lot of the times, though I am really happy to see that when I do, a lot of people understand and are ready for it, or have been waiting for somebody to say it. And the more that I say it, the more I see other people feel comfortable saying it, and kind of being like, you know what? A jar full of glitter is not hoodoo, so let's just talk about that real quick. Let's just be honest with ourselves, and understand that. And if you work with a jar of glitter in your spell, that is great, but let's not call it something that it's not. And really just be honest out there with what this work is and what it isn't, and what it requires. And it's really funny, because you'll say things online like, witchcraft requires effort, and people lose their minds because they can't believe that you just said something so controversial. So sometimes it is a little emotionally draining, but I do feel like we are actually making headway. People are actually starting to listen. People are people who also understand this work are starting to pipe up a little bit, which I think is really important right now.
Exactly. It takes one person to say the emperor has no clothes, and then everybody's like, yeah, he does it.
Exactly.
So that kind of brings me into your book, because we have this space dominated with like witchy 101s and just like make him love you and make your life awesome. And then your book is just like a secret love letter. I don't know. Talk to me about it.
Absolutely. And that is kind of how I describe it. My book is my love letter to all people who kind of find themselves in between. And by that, I kind of mean, stuck between two different races or two different cultures or two different kind of ethnic groups. And anyone who is biracial in any way will understand that feeling where one side views you as the other, and then the other side views you as the other as well. So you're kind of stuck in the middle where you don't kind of belong to either. You become an island among kind of unto yourself. And this book is specifically geared towards Mexican Americans who are living in the United States right now, and our particular brand of folk magic is kind of what the book is about. Because I was realizing that there's many different types of Mexican magic, Mexican folk magic, and then there are different types of American folk magic as well. But what I was noticing is that those of us who are Mexican American tend to have our own kind of unique way of working our magic, because once this magic leaves kind of its homeland and immigrates to another space, then once we arrive in that new space, we have new problems, we have different resources that are available to us. Some resources that we used to have aren't there, and that we have to substitute with new things that we have in the new place. We also are missing a lot of pillars in the spiritual life. So something that we find in Mexico are things like curanderos and curanderas, which are very, very important spiritual healers in our communities. And when we immigrate to the United States, there are curanderos and curanderas that do live here, but they're few and far between. And some of the ones that we find aren't always legit. And so a lot of us, Mexican American people who had immigrated had to then take that role on themselves. They didn't have curanderos and curanderas to go to. They had to do it themselves, which was kind of new. So these are all kind of challenges that we've been facing. And that's kind of what has helped shape this really interesting form of magic that is practiced now by Mexican American people. Which, when you ask one of us, what is this called? A lot of folks will tell you, oh, this is called brujeria. And it's partly a joke, but also sometimes people do mean it because they're trying to reclaim this idea of brujeria. But we have to also remember that brujeria is also its own practice in these foreign countries that is very much alive, very much happening. And what we are doing here in the United States and calling brujeria is not the same thing as it is, say, in Mexico. And so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't erasing that or pretending that this kind of new system of magic is something that it's not. So that's when I coined the term American Brujeria as a way of kind of differentiating what it is that I'm talking about, and kind of the specific form of it. And so that is how we kind of came up with the book. And it is my way of hoping to spotlight people who are both Mexican and American, and yet they don't feel Mexican enough to really be Mexican, but they also feel not quite like they fit with the Americans. So all of the people who kind of find themselves isolated in between, this book is definitely geared towards you and for you. And we talk about this sort of in-between nature as like a liminal space, like a crossroads where two things meet, and how powerful that is. A lot of times people of mixed culture feel very alone and very powerless because they don't feel like they really belong. But I hope that people will start to see themselves as a bridge instead of a kind of a moat, like I want people to realize that there's power in this connection between the two cultures. So that's something I'm hoping comes out of the book.
So this is the book, in case you guys didn't see it on the thumbnail. And I just want to say, I did I bought this, and then I saw that you had signed copies, so then I bought a signed copy, and so now I have an extra one, and that's going to be given away in this live. And I'll talk to you guys about that towards the end, because I really want to just really quick, I'm Puerto Rican, but I got a ton out of this book. I liked it very much. I loved it, as a matter of fact. And I feel like regardless of how you identify culturally, or where you are in your journey, or where you are, who you are, I do think that you can get something out of this book. There's a lot of really good information. And what I really appreciated about it is that, well, there's lots of things I appreciate it, but I want to say, like, it's nice to have a different perspective instead of the same information regurgitated over and over and over and over and over again with people with very similar backgrounds writing 90% of the information that you have out there about magical practice. And even if you're not Latino, if you don't intend to practice this way, just getting a breath of fresh air with different information about the same things that you're normally doing, I think is vital for your practice in general. So regardless of who you are, still buy this book.
I agree.
And so a couple other questions. So what are the key themes that you really cover in the book? I know the liminal spaces is massive, and like finding this belonging, but other key things, because it does go into some really interesting, extremely important topics.
Yes. So where the whole book kind of starts off is sort of understanding the people and the culture, because we have to remember that if we're going to practice folk magic, we can't leave the folk behind. And so what we have to do is we have to get an idea for what it is like to be Mexican American, and that's something that I try to kind of go over in the first chapter of the book, where I kind of talk about, our culture. We throw around some Spanglish in the first chapter a lot, and that's kind of what the introduction is titled, is Spanglish, because it really exemplifies this in-between space where we're both kind of American but also Mexican, and we're not quite sure which one. And so we talk about things like the three main pillars of this work that kind of makes it all function, and that's going to be our faith in God and the saints and the higher powers that are available to us, the earth and the plants and the things that provides with us as well, and lastly and most importantly is tradition. One thing that I really came to understand while I was researching this book is that no two people are going to do this work the same, because not only does it differ between which region you are coming from, but also which family you are coming from. It's like, it's like grandmas and their apple pie recipe, right? Mm-hmm. One grandma's going to be like, no, the way you do it is like this is the way. And then another grandma's going to be like, no, that's total crap. You're going to do it this way instead. And so we really find that in folk magic, because folk magic is the magic of the people, which means that each family is going to have a specific way of doing it. And I want people to really feel empowered that when they're reading my work, that if they're reading it and they're going, oh no, my abuela told me to do this, a different way, then go the way that she told you. Because when you do it the way that she told you, then it's not just you doing it alone. She's there with you. And then her mother who taught her, and, her mother's father who taught her, and so on and so forth. You have these people gathered around you when you do it that way. So it's so important. So we have to really kind of realize how that culture works. And then we go into things like the different spirits associated with this work. That includes like Guadalupe, La Santa Muerte. We also talk about the saints, as well as folk saints that are specific to Mexico as well. And these are all kind of our spirit allies on the other side. Then, of course, we talk about prayer, which is wonderful. And then we go into what we call hechizos, which are these spells that are deceptively simple but very powerful, because we have to remember a lot of folk magic comes out of places of need where people don't have a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of extra energy, because we're people that work a lot, and so that's something that has to work its way into our magic. So we have whole sections on different spells and how to go about them as well. So I really wanted the book to be as well-rounded as possible.
Yeah. Did your anybody in your family ever do the little magic spell sana 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 colita de rana when you were hurt? I swear it worked. I do it to my son.
No, I didn't have that happen to me when I was a kid, but so many of the people I was interviewing, one of my first questions I would ask people would be like, just to kind of ease them in as like an icebreaker, be like, so did your family use Vicks Vapor Rub when you were, growing up, when you were sick? And people had all kinds of different stories about how their family would handle it or use it or whatever. And so those are really fascinating. And you also get to see kind of the differences between the generations, because a lot of the older generation, so I'd be talking with like young people and they'd be talking about their grandparents who used to like eat the Vicks Vapor Rub, or stir it into like their coffee and like drink it or something like that. And I'm like, okay, first of all, it says right on the bottle, like, don't do that, like, don't eat it. But also, our grandparents were hardcore like that, so that was always a funny part of the interview process that I went through.
That's so funny. So there are a couple questions, and I'm going to brief because I want to listen to you talk more. But so they're just curious, if you are not Mexican, what can you take away? And I think you're doing an excellent job. But in general, like if people walked away with just a few little tidbits or a little change of themselves after putting down your book and reading it cover to cover, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with a deeper appreciation for Mexican culture, and the power that resides under things that might seem silly to people who are looking from the outside. And anyone who is not Mexican who's interested in this book, in the first chapter, I do include a guide for those who are approaching the work from outside of the community, where I walk you through kind of things I want you to keep in mind. We talk about cultural appropriation and how to avoid it, and to know kind of what is and is not cultural appropriation. So all of that is built into the book. I knew as soon as this book was published, I would have no say in who picked it up, read it, did whatever they wanted with what was in the book. And so what I wanted to build in there was some guidelines for those people who are coming from outside of the community, and so they feel not only welcome, but also they feel comfortable knowing where their lanes are within it.
Perfect. What didn't make it into the book?
Oh gosh.
You could probably write another book about that, huh?
Well, it was so funny because different publishers have different word count limits, and so Wiser will top their books right at about 65,000 words, and I believe my final manuscript submission came in at like 6,499 words.
Oh my gosh.
I was right there. So there were a few things that I actually wasn't going to put into the book. Things like how to make your own oils and some of the recipes in the book I wasn't originally going to include, because I kind of wanted to keep some of it secret, or some of my own recipes kind of personal. But then I kept coming back to this idea that, our community kind of generally and classically doesn't tend to have a lot of extra money to burn. And so people aren't able to really amass giant collections of magical books to learn from all the different places. And so I wanted to really make my book in a way that if they only could buy one book, I wanted it to be able to carry them for several years based off of what is in the book. My book has been reviewed as wordy, because it is rather long, but I wanted to pack in as much as I could in there. So there was very little that actually got left out, which I felt really good about.
Wonderful. And I love that perspective, that you are trying to really contribute as opposed to just sell, which I feel like I'm a huge consumer. Do not get me wrong. Buy whatever you want. Do it. Buy it. Treat yourself. But if you don't have money, you should still be able to engage in all of these practices and really live a deep and fulfilled spiritual life. And I really appreciate that almost nothing in here is expensive or difficult to source or buy. So that was it really came through wonderfully. It's very accessible. How about that?
That's a good word.
What about the timeline? So surely you had this little inception, this little seed in your heart for some period. Seed in your heart to publication.
Yes. Well, Well, it's so funny because it all started when I met my friend Anwen Avalon. She writes the books on water magic and water witchcraft. She is amazing and so intelligent, and I love hanging out with her. Her and I are actually neighbors, and we sort of met by accident. And she, at the time that I met her, was just about to publish her very first book, which was Water Witchcraft. And I have always wanted to be a writer. That's like since I was a kid, that was my goal in life. Is I tried to get like published writing fiction when I was in high school. It did not work out, but it was something I've always kind of looked forward to. And so I had been building this knowledge pretty much all my life, doing this magical practice. And so I knew it was time. I knew I was ready to write something, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to write. And so I met her and she's like, oh my gosh, you should totally do it. Let me hook you up with my editor, who is now my editor with Wiser. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write something. And I had originally written a completely different book. I had actually pitched a book on just simply North American folk magic to Wiser. And and then promptly got on a plane to go meet with my editor at PantheaCon, which I was just talking about. It's kind of a convoluted story, but anyway. On my way there, I'm realizing that I don't have the necessary framing abilities for the North American folk magic book. Because I'm like, there are so many cultures involved here. How do I even approach this without the cultural appropriation? Like, how do I even traverse this? And so I wanted to kind of focus it down. I needed to focus it down to something more specific, something that I was a part of. And it sort of just hit me one morning while I was lying in my hotel room, and I immediately just started writing, and I wrote like all through the night. And I meet up with Judica, who's now my editor, and I'm like, hi, so did you read that one manuscript I sent you? She's like, I haven't had any time. I'm like, good, throw it in the trash. I have something else for you. And that's kind of how it was born. It was me sitting there going like, I need to write specifically what I know, something that I'm a part of, something that I feel will really impact the community in a way that I wanted it to. And that's when the idea struck me, that I realized that even though I'm not, a Mexican person from Mexico, those of us who are Mexican American have our own specific way of working, and that somebody needed to spotlight that. And so that's when I decided to go forward with it. And then, of course, after I talked with Judica and she loves it and wants me to send her the rest of the manuscript, I then begin to panic because I'm like, oh, okay, so now I'm the voice of my community, of all these people of Latinx descent across the United States. And so I was like, this book cannot just be about me and my experience. It has to be about the broader community. So that's when I started calling everybody I knew of Mexican American descent and asking them about their families, about their traditions, about, weird stories that they, had heard. And that's when their voices came in. And the book really ended up being about them in the long run. And I was so happy to get to do that and to kind of bring their voices into the project. I knew it was something I needed to do, and I'm so glad I got to be able to do that.
I love that. My heart's pounding. That's a really excellent thing that you bring up. So just a quick parallel. I am a Latina nurse. Only 5% of nurses in the United States are Latina. And so I feel like when you are a professional minority, particularly Latinx, because we're not really represented in a lot of professions, like what you consider a professional. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of responsibility, but also pride and challenges, which I'm cognizantly aware of as I work and as I am a representative in my community for Latinx nurses. And I see you as that for us, because when you talk, but just first of all, when you show up, I see a face that's similar to me. You look like somebody who could be in my family, which is familiar and welcoming. But then when you tell stories, they sound like our stories, right? I could see my abuelita and a lot of the things my abuelita has done. I could see my family doing those things. When you talk about those magic and what some of us might call superstitions, I they bring back childhood memories. Maybe it wasn't exactly the same, but it was so moving and important. And you brought this into a space that's dominated by, no offense, because I love you guys, white women. And so to see our faces and to hear our stories and to see our magic was so intensely moving for me. But I know as a person of Latinx background, professionally, I have to be better, smarter, calmer, or else I'm just a hysteric Latina, or I just got this scholarship because I'm Latino. And I know that that happens to you. And I would really love if you would share some of the challenges and the joys of being a representative of our community in a white dominated profession.
Absolutely. It is also one of the reasons why I wanted to do this book in general, was because up until my book came out, we really didn't have a book that was put out by a major magical publisher about Mexican magic that was by somebody from the Mexican culture. So I really wanted to try my best to correct that, or at least be the first. I will admit this is probably my only work on kind of Mexican folk magic that I'll be putting out, at least for now. Maybe there will be another one. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to not only be that first one, but also kind of open that door for others. And I do know of a couple of people who will be following up my book, and I am very excited to see what they come through with. So it is not the end. I am just the beginning, which is what I really hoped for. But up until basically me, and then of course we have other publishers coming out with stuff too. We have Eric and Alexis that came out with Magia right around the same time, which are very important. Up until then, though, all of the books about our culture had been written by white women, and with varying degrees of success. There was one that came out quite a while ago that's fairly well known. I won't necessarily say the name of it, but this person tried to approach it from an anthropologist perspective and like interviewed a bunch of people, which was great. She did the best that she could, but the thing that people aren't aware of is that when you are an outsider that comes into these spaces asking the questions about what are the secrets, what are the recipes and all this stuff, people have a tendency to lie to you. So this woman got punked by a lot of brujas, and the information in her book is just not correct. So that came out a long time ago. And then more recently, we're seeing, other books very similarly being written in that vein. And what's hard is occasionally I do have people who try to tell me that my information is wrong based off of these works that are put out by people who are not from the community, and they're like, well, in this book it says this, and this person is allegedly like a trained bruja or whatever, and that's something that's difficult for me to try and combat, and just simply say like, well, that is completely not right. That people don't really necessarily want to hear that. People think that we are all kind of on the same level as far as accuracy is concerned throughout it. So that's something I have kind of run up against a little bit, having to kind of put out some fires that were started by other people. But overall, it's been a really good experience, simply because there are so many invisible people that have been impacted by this book that are now being seen. Yeah. And I think that's the part that's been the biggest takeaway, is the fact that we didn't really notice that these people were all around us, because a lot of these people don't look Mexican, right? They're either too light skinned or they're too black to really, feel like they fit into the stereotypical, Mexican or Latinx, family. And so these people get kind of shunned, they get left out, they don't get thought of very much. And so being able to bring this book forward was also able to bring them forward. And then I feel like now that we're all kind of together a little bit, or at least have something linking us together, we're louder. And so I think that we're starting to undo a lot of what was done previously, which I think is important. So those are some things that I'm kind of running into a little bit. And this idea too about being kind of Mexican enough is something that I'm running into as well, where people are like, oh, well, especially like on social media, people make up rules and the rules change. Like I've had people be like, oh, like, you know, if you don't speak Spanish, then you're not Mexican. And I'm like, Selena didn't speak Spanish, but we're not going to go there.
I know, she sure didn't.
Right.
Learn.
And then I even have people sending me messages that are like, you know, like, I'm full-blooded Mexican. I grew up in Mexico City. I still live in Mexico City. I speak fluent Spanish, but I was told that because I'm light-skinned, I can't do this work. Like the bar keeps getting moved.
Yeah.
So it's something that we run into, but I am learning to embrace that difference. I'm learning to embrace the fact that my Spanish isn't very good, and that's okay. Like, because I'm not a Mexican from Mexico. I am a person who speaks Spanglish because that's where my area resides.
I've heard you speak Spanish on occasion, and it sounds fine. But I think another thing is sometimes we eat each other up as people of color, because it's really important. There's like, I don't know, thousands of dialects of Spanish, and sometimes I live in an area that has predominantly Mexican population, so my patients are typically Mexicans, a lot from Michoacan, but they'll be like, oh, your Spanish is so cute, dude. Did you learn? It's like, I've been speaking Spanish since I was born. I'm Puerto Rican. I don't speak Mexican Spanish. And I've even, my mother's noticed that I've started speaking more in a Mexican dialect, and she's like, what are you doing? That your grandmother's flipping in her grave. But, well, she's not in a grave. But so I do feel that I really appreciate you standing strong and still being there, because the message, they're literally just proving the message in your book that it's for you. You don't have to fit in perfectly in any one spot. You are enough, and you have the right to do these things, because in the United States, there used to be a law. If you had one drop of minority blood, you couldn't marry a white person. So if you just have that one drop somewhere, then you are other already. So why not embrace your other brothers and sisters, right?
Absolutely.
So the other thing is, they're saying how, in the comments, they just want to know, how can they avoid false information? Because I know the information in your book was very, very good, but I have been looking for books like yours. A lot of them are not Latinx authors, which already kind of puts me on edge. But how does the average person know that they're reading a pile of crap?
I have several steps I like to tell people to go through. So say you're looking for a book on a specific type of magic. So we'll just use Mexican magic for kind of our example. So you Google, you know, books on Mexican magic, and you get kind of, you know, a list, a few of them pop up or whatever. And so you go to look at them. The things I want you to look at are, first and foremost, who is the publisher? Because when we do one of these books, the publisher really matters, because in order to have my book pass through and get published through Wiser, it has to pass through Judica Isles, who is my editor. She is a very well-known magical author who knows her stuff inside and out, which means that other witches read my material and have to give it the okay. And these are witches that have been doing this for a really long time. However, non-magical publishers have found out that there is money to be made in some occult publishing realms, and so they've started to put out magical books as well. The unfortunate part, though, is that a lot of the times these non-magical publishers don't have magical people reading the materials to edit them. So there is very little ability for them to be like, this is not correct information, that is not what this word means, things like that. And so some of the books that we're seeing that are coming out from non-magical publishers have certain issues with them. So I always recommend checking out the publisher, who's putting it out. On top of that, too, we are seeing something that we call algorithm books coming out these days. And I have been approached to write one of these, and it's kind of a funny story, because someone comes up to me and is like, hey, would you like to publish a book through us? We do extensive market research to find out what is popular online. We then make a book of what is popular. We tell you what to put in it and put your name on it, and then we publish it. And some very popular books that have come out lately are written this way. And what's funny is when I asked, okay, so what happens if what you want me to put in the book is not correct or not safe, but it is popular? What if I don't want to put something popular in there that is not correct? And they ceased all communication with me.
Mm.
So that is just something to be aware of. So first of all, check your publisher. Who's putting it up? The second thing is check out the author. Are they from the community that they're writing about? If this is a book on Mexican magic, are they Mexican? Are they part of the community? Are they from Mexico? Are they Mexican American? What is their background? And if they're not, what is their training? Sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, like I had extensive training, and you go to dig, and that training is like a weekend workshop in Sedona, and now they're a current bruja, which can be an issue. So we have to look at the publisher and at the author. Are these people that are able to put out this book? The last thing I like to look at is whenever anyone puts out a book like this, they tend to gather what we call blurbs, which are the things on the back that are like Erica Buenaflor says this. Yeah. Eric and Alexis say that on the book. Who are doing those blurbs? Is this a book of Mexican magic, and all the blurbs are from people who do not do that type of magic? Or are they from people who do that type of magic? That's very important to look at. Who are these people that are supporting this book? Because if you brought me a book on Icelandic folk magic that was completely wrong, and I didn't know it, I'd probably be like, huh, interesting. That's something I now know. I didn't, because I had no idea what it was before. It's a lot easier to fool people when we have no idea what that is. So I definitely ask people to look at kind of who is supporting the book. Are they people that really know the work? And so those are definitely the three places to look. Who's publishing it, who's writing it, and who's kind of reviewing it and supporting it. And if you go through and those things all check out, it's a magical publisher, and that's also not to say that good magical books do not come from, magical publishers, non-magical publishers. Sometimes, Penguin, Random House, or whatever do come out with a very good magical book. But that's just kind of the first place to check. And then, is the author qualified? And then are the reviews also qualified people who are saying, yes, this is good work? Those are the things to check out.
Do you have any other Latinx magical author recommendations?
Absolutely. I do. I have a deep love and respect for Erica Buenaflor.
Yeah.
She is amazing. She joined me on my virtual book launch. I've taken many of her classes and workshops. In her books, she does an excellent job, because not only is she like, I don't know how her brain can carry all this information, but she's reading through like ancient like Mesoamerican texts to find out how the Aztecs and the Mexicas did all this way back when. And she's also spent extensive time actually working with curanderas in Central American countries. And then she then writes these books, but she writes them in a way that we can understand them. They're very accessible. They're very straightforward. She doesn't, she uses common language that a lot of people can really understand. And I think that's important. Sometimes when it comes to the world of like occult writing, it has to sound really fancy and very kind of, scientific or whatever. But she does a really good job of being like, look, here's how we're going to do it, and really making it accessible to a lot of people. So I highly recommend her work.
I wanted to do her class today, but I'm got a homework assignment.
Oh no.
I know, because it sounded so good, medical intuition, and I'm like, ooh, I'll be a better healer, but I guess in all due time. So you also mentioned Eric and Alexis. Do you recommend their book as well?
Oh yeah, I do love the first one, the Mejia. Yeah, it's really good. I think they're coming out with a second one, but I have not read it yet.
I went to their lecture. It was a little bit more dense. Like your book, I felt was very like I could roll with it immediately. That one, I was like, I have to think about this. I'm gonna come back to it. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for those recommendations. And is it safe to say, like, anybody who's kind of done a blurb for you in here who also has a book, they're a reasonable resource to look at?
Yeah, I was actually really selective with the people that I sent it out to. And we actually got so many great people in here. And they really run the gamut from different places. So we have Orion Foxwood, who wrote a blurb for it, and I really absolutely love their book, The Flame in the Cauldron. It's not Mexican, but it is really a powerful piece of work on witchcraft. I really like their works. But yeah, so we have like Elohim Lifar. They're great. I love them. I love Elo.
Yeah.
He is such a light in the community. His book on charm bags is one of my most favorite. I love that.
Wonderful.
And Mary Grace Farron too did a blurb for this, which is wonderful because her book Italian Folk Magic was actually kind of the inspiration for mine, because kind of that day when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write, I actually had her book on my nightstand, and I was like, oh, I could do this. Like this is it. So I really love her book on Italian Folk Magic.
That's wonderful. So just really quickly, I had your link for your Etsy where you were selling signed copies. I know that they're sold out. And I do have an Amazon link in there, but is there somewhere you prefer people buy your book if possible?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different places you can buy it. Of course, there's always Amazon, but you can also find it on bookshop.org, which is a great place. And a little bit of the money that you spend on the book goes to help support small bookstores, which I really love. And I highly recommend that people purchase it from kind of their local metaphysical bookstores. These are really the backbone of our community, is these little metaphysical shops that sell books and candles and herbs and things like that. If without them, we wouldn't really have anything kind of stringing us all together into a community. And so highly recommend either going and purchasing from them. A lot of them you can order it through them too. So something I'm hearing from a lot of people who have occult bookstores are that they can't keep my book in stock because it keeps selling so quickly, which is great. But also that means that sometimes people show up and it's not there. So if that happens, definitely ask the people who own it or work there to put your name down for one of them, or to have them order it if they don't have it already, and then they can do that. And that way you're also supporting their business as well.
Wonderful. So what's next for you?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I have a few things going on right now. I can't necessarily talk about them yet, but this is not the last book you will be hearing from me. So do expect further books, different topics. We're going to be expanding a bit here as we move forward. But I'm very excited to see where it goes. I'm very excited to take you all with me and learn about as many different things as we can as we move forward. So.
That's exciting. Just a little teaser. But I want to mention that for those of you who really are digging Jay's vibe, or you really just absolutely love this book, or you're super intrigued by everything that he's saying, he has a ton of offerings available. So I do have his link. His YouTube channel, which is not as active as his Instagram, which is where I get most of my daily information. He runs an amazing podcast called Invoking Witchcraft with Britton from Archaic Honey. And that's free on wherever you do podcasts. I have a little app on my phone. I don't know how other people do it, but I'm sure that I have a link.
We're on Spotify. We're on all the things.
Exactly. And you can join. They have a little coven. It's not really like a practicing coven. It's more like a group where you can ask questions. Or, why don't you just tell us all about it?
Yeah, so we do have a coven. So if you go we have an Instagram for the podcast. So it's just invoking_witchcraft is our podcast Instagram page. Through there's a link in the bio where you can sign up for our coven. It's sliding scale, so you just pay what you can. I think it starts off at $5, and you get access to our exclusive Facebook group that you'll be added to. And in there, we have one of the first workshops that her and I did, which is on spirit work. And then every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we go live for an hour and we answer people's questions. and then we save those in the group. So even if you are just joining now, you can go back and watch all the other Q&As that we've done as well, and that 2-hour class that we did on spirit work. So all of that is available for $5 a month. You get 4 hours a month of coaching from 2 very qualified people. And if you don't know of Britain or follow them, their Instagram is at Archaic Honey, and they are wonderful. And I love co-hosting the podcast with them.
It really is wonderful, guys. That was actually the first workshop I've ever done, was the spirit workshop, and I loved it. So then I joined the Coven and the podcast. You guys will get so much information. Just excellent. I love the 3 episodes on protection. Mm-hmm. And the people who are not people episode. If you only listen to one, listen to that one, because it was so creepy. It's really
that one has freaked some people out. I've gotten messages where like, I was driving at night listening to this, and I'm now messed up. And I'm like, oh no.
I love the one about things not to do, because I made the mistake of listening to that with my husband, and he's like, and I'm like, why did you miss this? So Dee wants to know if you're going to come back to your YouTube channel.
Oh, I do plan on doing that. It's going to, I have to actually set aside time for it, because I started kind of doing it, and then everything with the book kind of gave momentum and took over my life. So I'm hoping to come back to it for sure. It's on my to-do list. I sort of ended up putting that effort into TikTok, and you know, I don't like TikTok. It's a lot of work. It's very weird. I don't like it. So I think I am coming back to YouTube.
Oh, good. So I think I put the links in the description below, Zelda, for his media, for his YouTube, and for Invoking Witchcraft's, both their website, which will have links to the podcast, as well as where you can join the Coven, and their social media, which I think is on Instagram. So, and Facebook, but you have to kind of join the Coven to get into there. So all of those links. So my favorite question. So, so when I get my witch goal for myself is that I'm going to be a little viejita, little abuelita out in the woods with my house and my plants, that I can grow every plant and I can take care of every animal and I can heal anybody who comes to me. But I'm also like, take no shit matriarch. So kind of like Mama Imelda and Stregonona. That's what I want to be that's my witch goal. What's your witch goal? How do you see yourself as being your highest witch self?
Oh gosh. Now this is, of course, if money was not an obstacle.
Dream big.
In my witch goal. So in my witch dreams, how this would go out, it would be, I have always wanted to run a school of witchcraft, specifically a boarding school, because a lot of times when people kind of find out that they're a witch or begin to realize it, their families are not always accepting. And my experience of being a witch was very similar to my experience of being gay, where it wasn't necessarily a choice. It was something that I was, and there was no avoiding it. And so I want to kind of create a safe haven, a safe place where people can come and they can stay and they can learn about who they are, and how to use their gifts in a way that is safe, but also going to help them in their life and be very positive. My witch goals are basically Cordelia in American Horror Story Coven, just running the school in the big old house and teaching the witchcraft and the plants and all that stuff. That is my goal. I would love to do that. So if anyone has like a spare million to like buy a little brick castle thingy that I can put a bunch of witches in and teach in, let me know, and we'll get that started.
Well, keep writing. It'll happen. I know it. But you do teach really good classes now. So definitely, guys, I would check that out, because I like the way that you teach. I end up like not even looking so much at my screen most of the time, just writing and writing. It's so much information. I have to get every last bit. That's beautiful. I love that. I was thinking Dumbledore, but Cordelia's great too.
Better fashion sense than Dumbledore.
I know, his fashion was horrific. I don't know. Well, we'll see. And his taste in candy. So we're getting close to the end. Is there anything that you haven't said that you want to say, or any last little pearls?
No, other than just, if you are a person of mixed race who feels very much caught in between two very different places, just know that you're not alone. It might feel sometimes like you are alone, but you're not. There's a lot of us here, and we understand you, and we support you, and are here to be your family. So don't ever feel alone or powerless, because there's many of us, and you are powerful as a person who connects two worlds together. So never forget that.
That's beautiful. So now the moment people have been waiting for. This is American Brujeria. I have a copy to give away. How are you going to win this copy? If you don't already have it, and if you don't want to wait, just buy it. There's links below. But basically, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel and to Jay's channel. Jay's link is in the description below. And probably in the next 48 hours, I will make an announcement about who won this book. This is a brand spanking new book. Never read this little butt, nothing. I didn't even touch it once. I was like, oh, I need a signed copy. So this is going to make some lucky person's day. I really mean it. This is beautiful. That part with the doing things the way your ancestors have done them. I sent you a link from a different ancestral veneration book. It touched me so deeply. It touched me so deeply. So many parts were just like, oh yeah, oh yes, la chancla.
Right.
It was just so like coming home, like having a secret conversation with somebody that would only know these things if they had lived them, right? But I think that no matter who you are, you can find something like that in here, because I believe that most people have some kind of folk magic in their upbringing. They just don't recognize it. So it's really beautiful little peek into this world that we don't get to see enough. And I really want to give this copy away to somebody who needs it. And if you don't want to take any chances, buy that book, because it is legit. Any more questions? They want to know if you're okay. We did ask about the YouTube channel. And we have links for your book. And there's links for the podcast. Definitely check that out. I absolutely love it. I think we have covered all of our things, so I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say thank you so much, Jay, for coming to my little YouTube channel and saying hello, taking time out of your busy post-book world to make this happen. I really appreciate you. And so you guys, I love you. Please like, comment, and subscribe to both my channel and Jay's channel. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.